The habits that sabotage your relationships. You try so hard to connect with people you care about. Yet, something always gets in the way. It feels like you are speaking a different language. Your best intentions often lead to the same old arguments. You wonder if true understanding is even possible. This pattern leaves you feeling frustrated and alone. What if the biggest barrier to connection is not them, but an unseen force within you? Most people believe relationship problems stem from poor communication skills. They assume more talking will fix everything. This leads them to read books or attend workshops focused on active listening. They practice paraphrasing and asking clarifying questions. They try to be more patient and less reactive in conversations. Yet, the core issues persist, stubbornly refusing to budge. This is because they are addressing the symptoms, not the root cause. They are trying to change the words they say without understanding the deeper drivers of their behavior. Consider this. Studies show that over 80% of our daily actions are habits. These are automatic behaviors performed without conscious thought. This applies just as much to how we interact with loved ones. When you find yourself in a heated discussion, do you immediately think about your communication strategy? Probably not. You react based on ingrained patterns. These automatic responses are incredibly difficult to change directly. They are like the operating system of your mind. Trying to force a new behavior without understanding the system is exhausting. It's like trying to paint over rust without treating it first. The problem will always resurface. This constant cycle of trying and failing breeds cynicism. You start to believe that maybe you are just not good at relationships. You might even conclude that some people are simply incompatible. This is a deeply damaging conclusion. The truth is far more complex and far more hopeful. There is a scientific explanation for why we get stuck in these destructive patterns. It's not a moral failing or a lack of effort. It's about understanding the fundamental architecture of habit itself. This understanding can liberate you from repeating the same mistakes. It offers a new path forward. Imagine your brain as an incredibly efficient machine. Its primary goal is to conserve energy. Every time you learn something new, your brain expends a lot of energy. Think about learning to drive a car for the first time. You are hyper-aware of every single action. You concentrate intensely on steering, braking, and accelerating. Your brain is working overtime. You are consciously processing so much information. This requires significant mental effort. It feels exhausting, doesn't it? Now think about driving your car today. You likely do it without much conscious thought. You navigate traffic, change gears, and listen to music simultaneously. Your brain has found a way to automate this process. This is the genius of habit formation. Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or El Instituto Tecnológico de Massachusetts, made a groundbreaking discovery about this process. They found that when a behavior becomes a habit, the brain's activity actually decreases. It's not that the brain stops working, it becomes more efficient. The neural pathways become more streamlined. The complex decision-making process is offloaded. This allows your brain to free up mental resources for other tasks. It's a survival mechanism. Imagine if you had to consciously think about every single step of breathing or digesting your food. Life would be impossible. The El Instituto Tecnológico de Massachusetts researchers used advanced brain imaging techniques to observe this phenomenon. They studied how habits are formed and how they impact brain activity. Their work revealed a consistent pattern. This pattern is often referred to as the habit loop. It consists of three essential parts. The first is a cue or signal. This is what triggers the automatic behavior. The second part is the routine. This is the behavior itself. It is the action you perform. The third part is the reward. This is the positive outcome you experience. It's what makes the habit worthwhile. The cue tells your brain to go into automatic mode. It then follows a specific routine. Finally, it delivers a reward. This reward reinforces the loop. Over time, this loop becomes deeply ingrained. The brain learns to anticipate the reward. This anticipation is a powerful motivator. It drives the entire process. One of the most compelling studies involved laboratory rats. These intelligent creatures were placed in complex mazes. Initially, their brains showed immense activity. They explored, sniffed, and tried different paths. Every turn was a new decision. Their brains were actively engaged in problem solving. As the rats were repeatedly guided through the maze, something fascinating happened. Their brain activity began to shift. The initial exploration phase showed less and less activity. The researchers observed that the rats were no longer thinking as hard. They had learned the maze. Their behavior had become automatic. The activity in their brains collapsed at the beginning of the maze. It also diminished significantly in the middle sections. Only at the very end, when the reward was present, did they see a slight increase. This indicated that the maze had become a habit for the rats. The sequence of turns was encoded in their brains. They were no longer making conscious choices. The habit had been cemented. The researchers pinpointed the specific area of the brain responsible for this automation. It is a group of structures called the basal ganglia. This is where habits reside. When a behavior is repeated consistently, it moves from the prefrontal cortex, the area of conscious decision-making, to the basal ganglia. This is the brain's habit center. This discovery has profound implications for understanding human behavior. It explains why we often find ourselves acting in ways we don't intend. These habits are running on autopilot. Now, let's consider a real-world example of this principle in action. It involves a man named Paul O'Neill. He was appointed CEO of Alcoa, a large aluminum company, in 1991. At that time, Alcoa was struggling. It had been experiencing years of declining profits. The company was facing significant financial challenges. The investors were understandably concerned. O'Neill's first major address to the company was not about increasing profits or cutting costs. Instead, he focused entirely on workplace safety. This was a radical departure from the norm. Investors were baffled and many were furious. They had expected a plan for financial recovery. They saw his focus on safety as a distraction. They voiced their concerns loudly. Some even called for his immediate dismissal. They believed he was not the right leader to turn the company around. But O'Neill understood something crucial about habits. He knew that a company's culture is built on its habits. He believed that by changing the habits around safety, he could transform the entire organization. He implemented rigorous safety protocols. He demanded accountability for every accident, no matter how small. He empowered every employee to stop production if they felt it was unsafe. This created a new habit, the habit of prioritizing safety above all else. This single change began to ripple through the company. When employees felt safe, they were more engaged, they made fewer mistakes. Their focus improved. This led to a reduction in costly accidents and disruptions. The ripple effect continued. Improved safety led to increased efficiency. Reduced waste and fewer production delays. The quality of their products also improved. The investors, who had been so critical, were astonished. Within 1 year of O'Neill's appointment, Alcoa reported its highest historical profits. This was achieved not by focusing on profits directly, but by transforming the company's fundamental habits. O'Neill's success was a testament to the power of habit science. He didn't try to force a new profit-driven culture overnight. He changed the underlying behaviors that created the desired outcome. This is the key takeaway for your own life, especially in your relationships. You are likely experiencing relationship conflicts because of ingrained habits. These habits are triggered by certain cues and deliver a reward, even if it's a negative one. Think about a recurring argument you have with someone you care about. What is the signal that starts it? What is the pattern of behavior that follows? What do you get out of it, even if you don't realize it? Perhaps the cue is a specific comment they make. The routine is your immediate defensive reaction. The reward might be the fleeting sense of being right, or the temporary relief from acknowledging a deeper vulnerability. The problem is that these habits are often unconscious. You are not intentionally trying to create conflict. You are simply caught in a loop. The good news is that you can change these loops. The science of habit formation provides a clear roadmap. It's not about willpower alone, it's about understanding the mechanism. The core principle for changing any habit is to keep the cue and the reward the same, but change the routine. This is the most effective strategy because it leverages the existing brain pathways. Let's say you have a habit of reaching for a cigarette when you feel stressed. The cue is stress. The reward is a temporary sense of relaxation or distraction. The routine is smoking. If you want to change this habit, you don't necessarily need to eliminate stress. You also don't need to stop seeking a moment of calm. What you can change is the routine. Instead of smoking, you could try a different routine that delivers a similar reward. For example, when you feel stressed, you could step outside for 5 minutes and take deep breaths. The cue stress remains. The reward of feeling calmer is still achievable, but the routine has changed from smoking to mindful breathing. This strategy works because your brain is already wired for the cue and anticipates the reward. By substituting the routine, you are essentially reprogramming the habit loop. This is incredibly powerful for relationship dynamics. Consider a situation where you tend to become critical when you feel insecure. The cue is your insecurity. The routine is criticism. The reward might be a temporary feeling of control or a misguided attempt to elicit reassurance. To change this, you need to identify the cue and the reward. Your insecurity is the signal. The desire for reassurance or a sense of connection is the reward. The routine of criticism is what needs to be altered. Instead of criticizing, you could try a different routine. Perhaps you could practice expressing your insecurity directly. You could say something like, "I'm feeling a little insecure right now, and I could use some reassurance." This new routine directly addresses the reward you are seeking. It's a more honest and effective way to get your needs met. It also builds trust and intimacy. This approach requires conscious effort at first. You have to interrupt the old routine and consciously choose the new one. It will feel unnatural. You might slip up. That is perfectly normal. The key is to not get discouraged. Simply acknowledge the slip and return to practicing the new routine. The 3 specific mistakes people often make when trying to change habits, especially in relationships, are these. First, they try to change too much at once. They aim for a complete overhaul of their behavior, which is overwhelming. Second, they focus on willpower alone. They believe that if they just try hard enough, they can force themselves to act differently. This ignores the underlying neurological mechanisms. Third, they don't identify the true reward. They might think they are seeking comfort, but it could be a deeper need for control or validation. Understanding the real reward is crucial for finding an effective substitute routine. So, how do you apply this to your relationship conflicts? The first step is to identify a specific habit you want to change. Choose one that consistently leads to negative outcomes. Perhaps it's a tendency to withdraw when things get difficult, or maybe it's a habit of interrupting when you feel unheard. Pick just one to start. Once you have identified the habit, become a detective. What is the cue that triggers this behavior? When does it usually happen? What are the circumstances? Write down all the details you can observe. Be as specific as possible. This is the signal that initiates the automatic response. Next, identify the reward. What do you get out of this behavior, even if it feels bad afterward? What need is it temporarily fulfilling? Is it a sense of being right, a fleeting moment of distraction, or a misguided attempt to gain control? This can be challenging because the rewards of negative habits are often subtle or even subconscious. You might need to observe yourself over several instances of the habit. Once you have identified the cue and the reward, you can begin to design a new routine. This new routine must deliver a similar reward. It should be a more constructive and healthy behavior. For example, if your habit is to lash out when you feel criticized, and the reward is a temporary feeling of power, you need a new routine that provides a similar feeling of control or assertiveness without the aggression. Perhaps the new routine could be to take a deep breath, count to 10, and then calmly state your feelings. You could say, "When you say that, I feel hurt, and I need a moment to process it." This new routine still addresses the cue of criticism. It also aims for a similar reward of asserting yourself and feeling heard. However, it does so in a constructive way. The critical element here is consistency. You must practice this new routine every time the cue appears. It will feel awkward at first. You will likely revert to the old habit at times. That is why the single action for today is so important. Today, I want you to identify just one cue, just one signal that triggers a habit you want to change in your relationships. Do not try to change the routine yet. Do not even try to find the reward. Your only task for today is to become aware of the cue. Notice when it happens. Pay attention to the context. Simply observe it without judgment. This act of awareness is the first step in reprogramming your brain. It's like shining a light into a dark corner. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to see what is there. Tomorrow, you can move on to identifying the reward. The day after that, you can begin to experiment with a new routine. But for today, focus solely on the cue. This might seem too simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Most people are not even aware of the signals that drive their automatic behaviors. They are simply reacting. By becoming aware of the cue, you are regaining control. You are breaking free from the autopilot. You are starting to understand the science behind your own actions. This is not about blaming yourself for past mistakes. It is about empowering yourself with knowledge. It is about understanding that you have the capacity to change. The science of habit formation offers a profound insight. It reveals that our behaviors are not fixed, they are malleable. They can be reshaped. This is especially relevant for relationship conflicts. Many of these conflicts arise from deeply ingrained, often unconscious, habits of interaction. Think about the last time you felt misunderstood. What was the trigger? What did you do immediately after? What was the outcome? If you find yourself consistently engaging in patterns that lead to arguments or distance, it is likely due to habit loops. The cue, routine, reward cycle is firmly established. The challenge is that these loops are deeply embedded in our neural pathways. They feel natural and almost impossible to break. This is where the El Instituto Tecnológico de Massachusetts research becomes so vital. The discovery that brain activity decreases as a habit forms is a game changer. It explains why willpower alone is often insufficient. The habit is no longer a conscious decision. It's an automatic program running in the background. This is why simply telling yourself to be nicer or listen more often fails. The underlying neurological structure of the habit remains intact. Paul O'Neill's story with Alcoa is a perfect illustration of this. He didn't try to force a new company culture through sheer will. He focused on changing the fundamental habits related to safety. By transforming the routine of how safety was managed, he indirectly transformed the company's performance. The reward of fewer accidents and greater efficiency naturally followed. This principle can be directly applied to your relationships. The goal is not to eliminate difficult emotions or challenging conversations. It is to change the routines through which you navigate them. Consider a common relationship conflict, feeling dismissed. The cue might be a partner sharing an idea you disagree with. Your automatic routine might be to interrupt and state your opposing view forcefully. The reward you might be seeking, however unconsciously, is to feel heard or to assert your own perspective. The routine of forceful interruption, while seemingly achieving this momentarily, often leads to the opposite outcome, further conflict, and a sense of being unheard. To change this, you keep the cue the same, your partner sharing an idea you disagree with. You also keep the desired reward the same, feeling heard and asserting your perspective. The routine is what needs to be modified. Instead of interrupting, you could practice a new routine. This new routine could involve taking a pause, acknowledging your partner's statement, and then calmly expressing your differing viewpoint. For example, you could say, "I hear what you're saying, and I have a different perspective on this that I'd like to share." This new routine still allows you to assert your view, but it does so in a way that is less likely to escalate conflict. This requires conscious effort. It means interrupting your ingrained pattern. It means choosing a different path even when your brain is wired to take the old one. The initial stages of implementing a new routine can feel challenging. You might experience moments of frustration or doubt. This is a normal part of the process. The key is persistence. Every time you successfully implement the new routine, you are reinforcing a new neural pathway. You are essentially retraining your brain. The science tells us that repetition is the mother of all learning. The more you practice the new routine, the more automatic it will become. Eventually, it will feel as natural as the old habit. The twist, the unexpected paradox, is that by focusing on changing the routine, you are actually strengthening the potential for a more positive reward. The old, destructive routine might offer a fleeting, often negative reward. The new, constructive routine, however, opens the door to deeper connection, understanding, and genuine reassurance. This is the profound impact of understanding the habit loop. It shifts your focus from trying to control outcomes to understanding and influencing the underlying processes. The three common mistakes you might be making are: first, trying to change too many habits at once. This overwhelms your capacity for change. Select one habit to focus on. Second, relying solely on willpower. Willpower is a finite resource. Habits are deeply ingrained and require a more strategic approach than brute force. Third, not accurately identifying the reward. You might be mistaking a temporary distraction for a genuine need. Dig deeper to understand what you are truly seeking. The concrete method is simple yet powerful. Today, your single action is to identify one cue that triggers a relationship habit you want to change. Just observe it. Pay attention to the signal. When does it occur? What are the circumstances surrounding it? Do not judge it. Simply notice it. This act of observation is the beginning of transformation. It is the first step in breaking free from automatic patterns that sabotage your connections. You are not your habits. You are the conscious observer of your habits, and with that observation comes the power to change them. This is the beginning of a new understanding, a deeper insight into yourself and how you connect with others. It is a path toward more fulfilling and harmonious relationships. This is where things get really interesting. We've talked about the science of habits, that loop of cue, routine, and reward. We've touched on how this applies to our relationships, especially when emotions run high. Now, let's bring this to life with a story, a real person who navigated this complex terrain and found a way through. His name was Mark, and he was in his late 30s, a software engineer who prided himself on his logical mind. Mark loved his wife, Sarah, dearly, but their communication often felt like a battlefield. He was a man of few words, preferring to process his thoughts internally before speaking. Sarah, on the other hand, was expressive, needing to verbalize her feelings and concerns as they arose. This fundamental difference created a recurring conflict. When Sarah felt something was amiss, she'd approach Mark, seeking immediate discussion. Mark, feeling blindsided and unprepared, would often retreat, his mind racing to catch up. This retreat felt like dismissal to Sarah, fueling her frustration. His silence, meant to be thoughtful, was perceived as coldness. One evening, after a particularly tense exchange about a minor household decision, Mark found himself staring at the ceiling, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He knew he loved Sarah, but these recurring arguments left him feeling drained and confused. He realized his default reaction, his ingrained routine when faced with Sarah's emotional expression, was to shut down. The cue was her raised voice, her furrowed brow, her direct gaze. The routine was to mentally withdraw, to avoid eye contact, to offer minimal responses. The reward he sought was a sense of peace, an escape from the immediate discomfort. But the actual reward he received was Sarah's growing resentment and his own gnawing guilt. This pattern was not serving either of them. Mark decided he needed to understand this loop. He remembered reading about the habit loop, the cue, routine, reward. He started observing himself. He noticed that Sarah's initial approach, her seeking of connection, was the cue. His immediate, almost involuntary response was to go quiet, to analyze, to avoid the perceived confrontation. He was so focused on his internal processing that he completely missed the opportunity to connect. He wasn't consciously choosing to be difficult. It was just his automatic response. He saw that his routine of internalizing and delaying was creating a bigger problem. He then thought about the reward. What was he truly seeking? It wasn't just to stop the immediate discomfort. He wanted Sarah to understand him. He wanted her to feel secure in their relationship. He wanted to avoid the pain of conflict. But his current routine was actively undermining those deeper rewards. He was sacrificing long-term connection for short-term avoidance. He realized that the reward he was actually getting was a temporary reprieve from the emotional intensity, a false sense of control over his own internal state. This realization was a turning point. He understood that he needed to change the routine. The cue, Sarah's expression of concern, was likely to remain. The underlying reward, the desire for connection and understanding, was also a constant. It was the routine, that automatic shutdown, that needed modification. This was a daunting prospect. His entire life, his brain had been wired to react this way. It felt as natural as breathing. He decided to try something radical. The next time Sarah approached him with a concern, he made a conscious decision to alter his routine. Instead of immediately looking away and going silent, he took a deep breath. He made a deliberate effort to maintain eye contact. He then said, "Sarah, I hear you. I need a moment to process this, but I want to understand. Can we talk about it in 10 minutes? This was a small change, but it felt monumental. The first few times he tried this, it was incredibly difficult. His brain screamed for the familiar escape. He felt a surge of anxiety, a strong impulse to revert to his old ways. He had to actively fight against his own ingrained reactions. He would feel a flush of heat, a racing heart. He'd have to remind himself of the cue, the desired reward, and the need for a different routine. He was essentially building a new neural pathway, brick by painstaking brick. The measurable result was not immediate fireworks, but a subtle shift. Sarah, initially surprised by his slightly altered response, didn't immediately launch into a tirade. She saw him trying, she saw him acknowledging her. This small acknowledgement, this pause, created a tiny bit of space. It gave her a chance to regulate her own emotions too. Instead of feeling dismissed, she felt heard, even if he wasn't immediately offering solutions. The tension in the air lessened slightly. Over the next few weeks, Mark continued this practice. He learned to offer brief affirmations before stating his need for time. He would say things like, "I understand this is important to you," or "I can see you're feeling strongly about this." These were not grand pronouncements, but simple acknowledgments that validated Sarah's feelings. He was still processing internally, but he was doing it with her present, not away from her. The impact was profound. Sarah began to trust that Mark wasn't just ignoring her. She knew he would come back to the conversation. This trust reduced her initial intensity. She didn't feel the need to escalate to get his attention. The conflicts didn't disappear entirely, but their frequency and intensity significantly decreased. Mark found himself feeling less anxious during these discussions. He was still thinking, still analyzing, but he was doing it in a way that fostered connection rather than disconnection. He was achieving his deeper reward of feeling closer to Sarah, of building a stronger partnership. Now let's delve into the mechanism behind this change. Imagine your brain is like a vast, ancient forest. When you first learn something, or when a situation is new and requires significant thought, it's like blazing a new trail through dense undergrowth. You're hacking away, clearing branches, making slow progress. This requires a lot of energy and attention. This is high brain activity. But as you repeat that action, that thought process, that reaction, it's like that trail gets wider and smoother. More people use it, it becomes a well-trodden path. Eventually, it becomes a paved highway. Your brain, being incredibly efficient, notices this. It starts to automate the process. The energy required to travel down that highway drastically reduces. The activity in your brain shifts to a more primitive, instinctual part, the basal ganglia, which is responsible for automatic behaviors. It's like your brain has built a superhighway for that specific habit, allowing you to travel it with minimal conscious effort. This is why habits are so powerful and so hard to break. Your brain is literally designed to make them easier and easier. Now, for a metaphor that I believe offers a fresh perspective. Think about your emotional responses in conflict not as a highway, but as a river. When you're first learning to navigate a turbulent river, you're paddling furiously, using all your strength, your mind racing to steer clear of rocks and rapids. This is the intense brain activity of a new experience. As you gain experience, however, the river becomes familiar. You learn its currents, its eddies, its predictable patterns. Your paddling becomes more fluid, less conscious. You're not actively thinking about every stroke, you're just moving with the flow. This is the habit loop kicking in. The river itself represents the situation, the cue. Your paddling style is the routine. The feeling of successfully navigating and reaching the other side, or simply continuing down the river without capsizing, is the reward. The problem is, when we get stuck in a negative conflict habit, it's like we're on a river that's constantly leading us towards a waterfall. Our learned paddling routine is efficient for that river, but it's taking us to a disastrous destination. We're so good at navigating this specific, destructive river that we don't even realize we have the capacity to find a different river. The conventional wisdom says to just paddle harder to fight the current. But that's like trying to paddle upstream against a raging waterfall. It's exhausting and often futile. The true power, the unexpected twist, lies in realizing that you don't have to fight the river you're on. You have the ability to choose a different river. The cue, the turbulent waters of conflict, might be unavoidable, but the routine, your paddling style, can change. You can learn to steer your boat towards a calmer tributary. This tributary might initially feel unfamiliar, less efficient. It might have a different current, require a new kind of stroke. It might even feel like you're going slower at first. This is where the paradox lies. By choosing a seemingly less efficient, unfamiliar river, you are actually opening yourself up to a fundamentally different outcome, a more positive and sustainable reward. You're not just surviving the rapids, you're discovering a whole new landscape of connection. This is what Mark discovered. He didn't try to stop the river of Sarah's emotions. He learned to steer his own boat towards a calmer, more navigable tributary. His initial paddling on this new river felt awkward. He had to consciously think about his strokes, about how he was reacting. But with each successful navigation, with each instance of him offering a pause and an acknowledgement, that new tributary became wider, smoother. The old, waterfall-bound river began to recede in his awareness. The unanswered question from earlier was about how to effectively change a habit when the reward feels so compelling. The answer, as Mark found, is not to eliminate the reward, but to find a new, more constructive routine that delivers a better reward. His old routine offered a fleeting reward of immediate peace, but it came at the cost of long-term connection. His new routine, though initially demanding, offered the profound reward of genuine understanding and strengthened intimacy. The challenge now for you is to identify your own river. What is the cue that sends you into your habitual conflict routine? What is the seemingly compelling reward you seek? And most importantly, what different, calmer tributary could you steer your boat towards? This isn't about eradicating your natural responses, but about consciously choosing a different path. It's about recognizing that you are not just a passenger on the river of your emotions. You are the navigator of your own vessel. But as you begin to explore these calmer waters, a new question might arise. What happens when the other person in the conflict is not ready to explore a new river with you? What if they are determined to stay on the waterfall-bound path? This is a complex challenge, and one we will delve into next time. For now, focus on mastering your own navigation. This is where the real work begins, isn't it? It's one thing to understand the theory, to grasp the concept of choosing a different river. It's quite another to actually take the helm and steer your own boat towards those calmer waters. Many of us get stuck in a loop, a familiar pattern of conflict that feels almost comforting in its predictability, even when it's destructive. We're so conditioned to react in a certain way to specific triggers that we rarely pause to consider if there's another option. The reward might be fleeting, a temporary silencing of discomfort or a perceived victory, but the long-term cost is immense, eroding connection and trust. Let me tell you about Alina. She was in a marriage that had, over 25 years, developed a very specific rhythm of disagreement. It wasn't loud shouting matches. It was more of a subtle, insidious dance of passive aggression and unspoken resentments. Her husband, David, was a man of few words, and Alina often felt unheard and unappreciated. Her cue was usually when David would dismiss her concerns with a brief, almost imperceptible shrug. Her routine was to then withdraw, becoming colder and more distant, hoping he would notice her unhappiness and initiate a conversation. The reward she craved was for him to actively seek her out, to show he cared enough to understand her feelings. But David's response to her withdrawal was usually to retreat further into his own world, reinforcing Alina's belief that she was invisible. This cycle had been playing out for years, leaving Alina feeling increasingly isolated and resentful. One evening, after a particularly frustrating interaction where David had brushed aside her suggestion for a weekend trip with his usual non-committal grunt, Alina felt that familiar surge of anger and disappointment. Her instinct was to retreat to the bedroom and read a book, shutting him out completely. This was her river, the one that led to days of silent tension and a hollow feeling of disconnection. But this time, something was different. She had been listening to this program, contemplating the idea of choosing a different river. As she stood there, feeling the familiar pull towards her usual routine, she consciously paused. She recognized the cue, the shrug, and the desired reward, the hope for his attention. But instead of retreating, she made a radical decision. She took a deep breath and said very calmly, "David, I feel a bit dismissed when you do that. I was hoping we could talk about the trip." The tension in the room was palpable. David looked up, surprised by her directness and the absence of her usual icy silence. This was not part of his established routine. His brain, accustomed to her withdrawal as a signal to disengage, was momentarily stumped. Aliner's new routine, her calm but assertive statement, had disrupted his automatic response. He didn't immediately embrace her suggestion, of course. He mumbled something about being tired, but he didn't retreat into his shell. He stayed, he looked at her, and he engaged, however minimally. The reward Aliner received in that moment was not the deep conversation she craved, but something far more significant, a crack in the wall of their habitual conflict. David hadn't suddenly become a master communicator, but he had been presented with a new option, a different way to respond to her cue. The measurable result of this single decision was profound. That evening, instead of a silent, resentful night, they actually had a brief, albeit slightly awkward, conversation about the trip. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. Over the following weeks, Aliner continued to practice this new approach. When David would give his dismissive shrug, she would consciously choose to speak her feelings rather than retreat. Sometimes he responded with a similar awkwardness, sometimes with a flicker of understanding. But each time she chose this new river, she was reinforcing a new neural pathway, both for herself and, subtly, for him. The river of passive aggression and withdrawal began to feel less like the only option. She was actively charting a new course, one that promised a more fulfilling destination. Now, how does this actually work on a deeper level? Think of your brain like a vast, ancient forest. When you first learn something, it's like forging a new trail. You're hacking through undergrowth, it's difficult, and you're using a lot of energy. This is your conscious mind at work. But the more you travel that trail, the more worn it becomes. The trees are pushed aside, the path is cleared, and it becomes easier and easier to navigate. Eventually, you don't even need to think about the trail. Your feet just know where to go. This is your subconscious mind, your habitual brain taking over. This is the formation of a habit loop. The cue, the routine, and the reward. Your brain loves efficiency. It wants to conserve energy, so it automates behaviors. The problem is, sometimes these automated trails lead to undesirable destinations, like the destructive river of conflict we've been discussing. But here's where the science gets really interesting, and where we can introduce a metaphor you might not have encountered before. Imagine your brain is not just a forest, but a complex network of underground rivers. When a cue appears, it's like a specific mineral content in the water that flows through a particular channel. Your brain, having traveled this channel repeatedly, has carved a deep, efficient route. The routine is the way the water flows through that channel, carrying debris, eroding the banks, or perhaps, if it's a healthy river, nourishing the land. The reward is the mineral composition at the end of the river, the satisfaction or relief it brings. Now, when you want to change a habit, you're not trying to dam up that entire underground river system. That's almost impossible and incredibly disruptive. Instead, you're learning to introduce a subtle, yet powerful, additive to the water at a specific point. This additive is your conscious intention. When Aliner felt David's shrug, the cue, the water in her brain began to flow down the familiar, destructive channel towards her habitual withdrawal routine. The additive she introduced was her calm, assertive statement. This additive doesn't stop the water from flowing, but it changes its chemical composition as it moves. It introduces a new element that interacts with the existing flow, subtly altering the course and the eventual destination. This new composition, this conscious intention, begins to carve a new parallel channel. At first, this new channel is narrow and might feel awkward, like a trickle compared to the established river. The water might not flow as swiftly, and the mineral composition at its end might not be as immediately satisfying as the old reward. But with each conscious choice, with each time Alina introduces that additive, the new channel deepens and widens. The old river, while still present, becomes less dominant. The brain's remarkable plasticity means it can, and will, respond to these new, intentional inputs. It's not about erasing the old river, but about creating and reinforcing a new one that eventually becomes the preferred route. This brings us to the unexpected twist, the paradox that can truly shift your perspective. We often believe that changing a habit requires immense willpower, a constant battle against our ingrained tendencies. We think we need to suppress the old routine to fight against the urge. But the science and Alina's experience reveals something far more elegant. The most powerful way to change a habit is not by brute force, but by redirection. It's about understanding the underlying reward that your old habit is seeking, and then finding a more constructive routine that delivers a similar, or even superior, reward. Alina wasn't trying to stop feeling unheard. She was trying to find a way to be heard. Her old routine of withdrawal was a desperate attempt to gain David's attention, to get that reward of feeling seen and valued. Her new routine, speaking her feelings assertively, was a more direct and effective way to achieve that same reward. The unanswered question from earlier was about how to effectively change a habit when the reward feels so compelling. The answer lies not in denying the allure of the reward, but in understanding its true nature and finding a more skillful way to attain it. The compelling reward of immediate peace from conflict, for example, often comes at the expense of genuine connection. The reward of feeling right in an argument might feel powerful in the moment, but it often leads to a hollow victory and lasting resentment. By identifying the deeper, more fundamental need behind the compelling reward, we can then consciously choose a new routine that fulfills that need more effectively. Alina's compelling reward was not just to have her way about the trip, but to feel connected to David. Her old routine failed to deliver that deeper reward, while her new, more vulnerable approach began to open the door to it. So, as you begin to explore these calmer waters, remember that the goal isn't to eliminate the old rivers entirely. They are part of your landscape. The goal is to build new, healthier channels, to consciously choose where you want your internal waters to flow. You are the architect of your own internal waterways. But what happens when the other person in the conflict is not ready to explore a new river with you? What if they are determined to stay on the waterfall-bound path, paddling furiously against the current? This is a complex challenge, and one we will delve into next time. For now, focus on mastering your own navigation. The journey of cultivating emotional intelligence in relationships, especially when conflict arises, is a profound one. It's a path paved with self-awareness and a willingness to understand not just ourselves, but the intricate dance of emotions shared with another. We've touched upon the science of habits, the loop of cue, routine, and reward, and how understanding this can reshape our responses. But when emotions run high and disagreements escalate, it's easy to fall into predictable, unhelpful patterns. Recognizing these patterns is the first, crucial step toward meaningful change. Many of us, when faced with relationship conflict, fall into a trap of believing we must win the argument. This compulsion to be right, to prove our point, often overrides the desire for connection. We focus so intently on articulating our perspective, on defending our position, that we become deaf to the other person's underlying needs. This isn't about conceding defeat. It's about understanding that a relationship thrives on mutual understanding, not on individual victory. The immediate gratification of feeling validated in our own viewpoint can feel incredibly powerful, but it often comes at the steep price of creating distance and fostering resentment. We might feel a fleeting sense of triumph, but the deeper reward of a harmonious connection is sacrificed. Another common pitfall is the tendency to withdraw or shut down when emotions become overwhelming. This isn't always a conscious choice. It's often a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. When we feel attacked or misunderstood, our instinct might be to protect ourselves by disengaging. This can manifest as silence, avoidance, or even passive aggression. While this might offer temporary respite from the discomfort of conflict, it ultimately starves the relationship of open communication and genuine intimacy. The unmet need for connection and resolution festers, creating a silent chasm that widens with each avoided conversation. This emotional withdrawal, while seemingly protective, prevents the very repair and understanding that the relationship craves. A third mistake, often intertwined with the others, is the assumption that our interpretation of a situation is the absolute truth. We project our own fears, insecurities, and past experiences onto the present moment, believing we fully understand the other person's intentions. This cognitive bias, known as the fundamental attribution error, leads us to attribute their behavior to their character flaws while excusing our own actions. We might see their frustration as evidence of their stubbornness, failing to consider that their frustration might stem from feeling unheard or overwhelmed. This rigid interpretation prevents us from exploring alternative explanations and fosters a sense of righteous indignation that is detrimental to collaborative problem-solving. So, how do we navigate these treacherous waters and build stronger, more resilient connections? It begins with a deliberate, step-by-step approach to cultivating emotional intelligence within conflict. This isn't about acquiring a new skill overnight. It's about practicing a new mental framework, consistently and intentionally. The first concrete step is to pause before you react. This sounds simple, but in the heat of the moment, it's incredibly challenging. When you feel that surge of anger, defensiveness, or hurt, take a deep, conscious breath. Visualize yourself stepping back, just for a moment, from the immediate emotional storm. This pause creates a crucial space between the stimulus and your response, allowing your rational mind to engage. Think of it as creating a buffer zone, a small but vital sanctuary where you can choose your next action rather than being dictated by impulse. Once you've created that pause, the next step is to identify your own emotional state without judgment. Ask yourself, what am I truly feeling right now? Are you feeling hurt, scared, misunderstood, or frustrated? Naming the emotion is incredibly powerful. It helps to demystify it and reduce its overwhelming intensity. This isn't about dwelling on the feeling. It's about acknowledging its presence and understanding its source. For example, if you feel an urge to lash out, you might realize underneath that anger is a deep fear of rejection. Recognizing this fear allows you to address the root cause rather than just the symptom. Following this self-awareness, the critical step is to shift your focus from winning to understanding. Instead of formulating your next rebuttal, consciously ask yourself, what is the other person trying to communicate beyond their words? This requires active listening, a skill that goes far beyond simply hearing sounds. It means paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language, and the underlying emotions they might be expressing. Try to step into their shoes for a moment. What might be their perspective? What unmet need might they be trying to express? This is where you actively seek to comprehend their experience, even if you don't agree with it. The next step involves expressing your own needs and feelings clearly and calmly, using I statements. Instead of saying, "You always make me feel ignored," try, "I feel ignored when." This phrasing takes ownership of your emotions and avoids accusatory language that can trigger defensiveness. It communicates your experience without assigning blame. The goal here is to be vulnerable and authentic, sharing your inner world in a way that invites connection rather than escalating conflict. After expressing your needs, invite dialogue and collaboration. Frame the situation as a shared challenge that you both need to overcome together. Ask open-ended questions that encourage them to share their perspective further, such as, "How can we work through this together?" Or, "What do you think would be a fair solution?" This collaborative approach fosters a sense of partnership and mutual respect, transforming a potential battle into a joint problem-solving endeavor. It signals that you value their input and are committed to finding a resolution that works for both of you. Let me share a couple of examples of how these principles have made a tangible impact. Sarah, a marketing manager, found herself constantly clashing with her colleague Mark over project deadlines. She would become anxious and critical when Mark seemed to be falling behind, and he would become defensive and withdrawn. By consciously applying the pause, Sarah began to identify her anxiety stemmed from a fear of her own performance being jeopardized. She also realized Mark's perceived slowness was often due to him being overloaded with tasks she wasn't fully aware of. Instead of her usual sharp critiques, Sarah started with a calm, "Mark, I'm feeling a bit anxious about the timeline for this project. Can we talk about how things are going on your end?" This simple shift, using an I statement and an open-ended question, opened the door. Mark, instead of becoming defensive, felt heard. He explained the unexpected complexities he was facing. Together, they restructured the workload, reallocated some tasks, and established clearer communication checkpoints. The measurable result was not only a significant reduction in their interpersonal friction, but also the successful and timely completion of the project, with both feeling a sense of accomplishment and mutual respect. Then there's David and Maria, a couple who had been married for 20 years and found themselves arguing about household chores with increasing frequency and intensity. Maria felt overwhelmed and unappreciated, while David felt nagged and criticized. One evening, during a particularly heated exchange, Maria remembered a workshop she'd attended on emotional intelligence. She took a deep breath, and instead of launching into her usual litany of complaints, she said, "David, I'm feeling really exhausted and unappreciated when it comes to the chores. I need to feel like we're a team in managing our home." David, surprised by her calm demeanor and her use of I statements, paused. He realized his defensiveness was rooted in feeling like he was never doing enough. He responded, "Maria, I hear you. I've been feeling like no matter what I do, it's never the right thing. What can we do to make this feel more balanced for both of us?" They then sat down, not to assign blame, but to create a shared system for managing household responsibilities. They identified tasks, created a shared calendar, and agreed to check in weekly about how it was working. The measurable result was a dramatic decrease in arguments about chores, an increase in Maria's feelings of being supported, and a renewed sense of partnership in their marriage. David also reported feeling less pressure and more satisfaction in contributing. These aren't isolated incidents. They are examples of what is possible when we consciously choose to engage with conflict differently. The power to transform your relationships lies not in wishing the other person would change, but in committing to your own growth and adopting a new approach. So here's the single action you can take today. Not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. Choose one upcoming interaction, whether it's a conversation with a loved one, a colleague, or even a brief encounter with a stranger, where you anticipate even a small potential for misunderstanding or disagreement. Before that interaction begins, commit to pausing for just 3 seconds. 3 seconds to take a breath, to notice your own internal state, and to consciously decide to approach the situation with curiosity rather than judgment. This small, deliberate act of pausing is the seed of profound change. It's the commitment to being present, to choosing understanding over reaction, and to building bridges of connection instead of walls of conflict. Remember, the most impactful journeys begin with a single, intentional step. Embrace the opportunity to be the architect of a more compassionate and connected reality, starting today. The ripples of your conscious choices will extend far beyond the immediate moment, shaping the very fabric of your relationships.